The next item of business is a debate on motion 19253 in the name of Murdo Fraser on backing Scotland's colleges and apprenticeships. I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate. Please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Murdo Fraser to speak to and to move the motion. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Conservatives in Scotland, we believe that economic growth has to be the first priority of government. That has never been more urgent than now. Today's Scottish Chambers and Fraser of Allender quarterly survey of business contains some stark messages. In 4 out of 5 main business sectors, there has been a sharp decline in confidence, with manufacturing and construction, 2 of the most important sectors to the Scottish economy, being the hardest hit. And 72% of Scottish businesses are now concerned about their tax burden. Against that backdrop, a greater focus on economic growth from this government is essential. And isn't it interesting, Presiding Officer, that today, what do the SNP want to talk about? Independence. The only thing they care about. We are on the side of the people, talking about the people's priority, which is growing the economy and dealing with household bills. And when it comes to spending decisions taken in relation to the extensive resources that are under the control of the Scottish Government, there needs to be a focus on expenditure which will actively contribute towards growing our economy. Against that backdrop, the report on Scotland's colleges, published by Audit Scotland on Friday, contains some stark and concerning messages. And it follows on from equally stark messages from the Scottish Funding Council report just a few days before, which warned that some colleges actually face insolvency in the current financial year. Actual insolvency under this SNP government. According to Audit Scotland, college funding has suffered from a 20% real terms cut in spending over the past 5 years. And we see the consequences of that in every campus in Scotland. The Audit Scotland report states that the college sector workforce contracted by some 8% just in the year 2023 to 2024. In the region I represent, all the colleges are impacted. Fife College expressing concern about the availability of future courses. UHI Perth College having to save some £4 million by the middle of the year and already had to close the campus nursery whilst contemplating staff redundancies and cutting what they call unviable courses. They've even discussed cutting degree courses entirely. And lastly, Forth Valley College is proposing to close its popular and busy Alloa campus, meaning any Clackmannanshire students would have to travel to Stirling for further education, leaving a substantial black hole in the centre of the town and in the centre of the county. Bad news for staff, bad news for students, and bad news for the local economy. Now, the SNP cannot blame this funding situation on Westminster or an overall lack of resource. I'll give way to Mr Stewart, who wants to intervene.
Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank the member for the intervention. Colleges are fantastic institutions, as you already said, and are the skills engine for the Scottish economy. You've rightly identified the issues that are happening in Forth Valley and Alloa. So it's up to the Scottish Government to do more to retain students, maintain skills and secure facilities. That's what we fundamentally believe.
Always through the Chair. Murdo Fraser.
Yes, I thank Mr Stewart for that intervention. And he's absolutely right to put the, point the finger at the Scottish Government. And the Scottish Government cannot blame the situation on Westminster or on an overall lack of resource. In the same period, over the last 5 years, that college payments have reduced by 20% in real terms, the overall Scottish Government budget has seen a real terms increase of 2.5%. A real terms increase for the overall budget, but a 20% real terms cut for the college budget. So these closures and these cutbacks that we are seeing today are entirely down to the choices made by the SNP, deprioritising the training of skills for the future workforce that our colleges provide. Now, some but not all apprenticeships are delivered through our colleges, yet already there are concerns about the shortage of apprenticeship places. In 2024 to 25, learning providers requested around 34,000 apprenticeships to meet the needs of the economy. But the Scottish Government in that time funded just over 25,000, leaving a substantial gap. And the trade body Engineering Scotland estimate that 20% of the skills demand from employers has been unmet due to these real terms cuts in apprenticeship spending, whilst elsewhere other businesses express concern about the growing skills gap. The 2025 Open University Business Barometer report states that 56% of Scottish businesses are experiencing skills shortages, while 39% expect the skills gap to worsen in the next 5 years. And to give an example from another sector, the number of extra construction workers needed in Scotland for the period from 2025 up until 2029 is estimated at 3,590 per year, and we simply do not have the apprenticeship places available to provide the training to meet that demand. In the words of Michelle Ferguson, Director of CBI in Scotland, Scottish apprenticeships will be critical in building the future workforce, but we are simply not providing enough of them. Now, there's been some encouraging language from the Scottish Government about the need to promote a parity of esteem between different learning routes. Apprenticeships are as value to our future economy as our university degrees. But apprenticeships get much less attention and much lower funding, as indeed do college places. Figures from the Funding Council show that for the 24-25 financial year, funding per college student is just £5,054. The equivalent university student is £7,558, nearly half as much again. Yes, I have time.
There's really not very much time in hands. Up to the member.
Well, briefly.
Lawrence Slater.
In fact, this is a point of what I think is agreement. The member will recall in the Economy and Fair Work Committee, I believe we heard evidence saying that apprenticeships and college students have a much higher rate of working in the field that they are studying than university students. So there's actually something to be said for the, I guess, success of apprenticeships in college places in terms of producing people who are able to work in the fields that they are studying.
Yes, I'm grateful to Lawrence Slater for that intervention. I absolutely agree with that point that she has made about the importance of apprenticeships in delivering the skills for the future. Now, Presiding Officer, the SNP's response is to mess around with quangos, transferring responsibility for apprenticeships and national programmes from Skills Development Scotland to the Scottish Funding Council. And it is hard to find any stakeholder who believes this is the right move at the present time, and the transfer is likely to consume precious resources that could be spent elsewhere. So in closing, Presiding Officer, we need to see a restoration of funding to our colleges and apprenticeships, because these are vital to the economy of the future. They deserve investment and not cuts. That is what my motion today calls for, Presiding Officer, and I'm very pleased to move it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Fraser. I now call on Richard Lochhead to speak to and to move Amendment 19253.3. Up to 5 minutes, please, Minister. I don't call Richard Lochhead. I call Ben McPherson, Minister. Still up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I and my colleagues really welcome this debate on these important matters to all of us in representing our constituents, and the opportunity to respond to the motion and restate the Scottish Government's strong commitment to supporting our people to fulfil their potential and tackling skill shortages that there are in our economy. We're focused on building a fair, prosperous and successful economy, supported by an education and skills system that is flexible and ready to meet the needs of people, communities and employers. We know that Scotland's future success depends on creating good jobs and making sure people have the right opportunities and skills to access them. I will, yes.
Elizabeth.
As Murdo Fraser said, it's very encouraging to hear that from the Minister. But how does he square that with a 20% real terms cut in the budget for colleges?
Minister.
We'll come on to the specifics in due course, but I just want to emphasise in response and in general terms that our colleges, as well as our employers and universities and training providers, are absolutely key to helping people gain the skills that they need. We, as the Scottish Government, greatly value their contribution collectively, especially in delivering a record number of apprenticeships and helping so many school leavers move on to positive destinations. And our amendment states, which I move, the positive record that we have on young people and others achieving positive destinations, and also the significant investment that has been made this financial year, and that we note the Audit Scotland report. Because we know there is more work to do, we're committed to a new national approach to skills planning led by the Scottish Government, and the aim is to better align post-school education and training pathways with Scotland's long-term skills needs, especially in key sectors of our economy that support the move to net zero. We are working closely with the Scottish Funding Council and Skills Development Scotland to take this forward. Together, we have agreed a model for skills planning that we'll shape through engagement with colleges, universities, employers and regional partners. This collaborative approach means that we can move quickly and make real progress. We're also working with regional economic partnerships, which are really important, to build on what's already working well and to strengthen regional skills planning. Our goal is to empower regions to deliver on their economic and social ambitions while contributing to national priorities. We want the post-school system to be more responsive to regional needs, and we're building on the strong foundations already set through the Scottish Funding Council's Regional Tertiary Pathfinders programme, along with other local initiatives. But there are limits on what we can do on our own. We do not operate in a bubble. The impact of Brexit and the UK Government's migration system has undoubtedly added to labour market pressures, that is a fact, and we continue to make the case for a more flexible and responsive approach to migration that reflects Scotland's specific needs. I'll take an intervention.
Briefly, Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Does the Minister accept any responsibility at all for the state of Scotland's colleges?
Minister.
The Scottish Government is proud to be working alongside Scotland's colleges in how they are delivering as anchor institutions in our communities. And I visited Kelvin College in the Members' Region yesterday and was hugely impressed by all involved who I engaged with. And I'm committed to positive, constructive and proactive engagement with our college sector in this role moving forward, and I've been very proud to do so in the days that have been imposed. While some pressures are out of our hands, as I've mentioned, we're not standing still. We're taking responsibility and making progress. We know that transformation takes time, and we also accept action is needed now to address the skills gaps that are constraining parts of our economy from filling their full potential. That's why, alongside our long-term reform, we're continuing to invest in sectors that are important to Scotland's economic future, including offshore wind, social care, engineering and advanced manufacturing. Building on this commitment, we've agreed a new grant with Energy Skills Partnership to deliver a college-led sector offshore wind skills programme backed by up to £3 million in 25-26. And there's more I could say that my colleague may touch on in his conclusion on behalf of the Government. But what I would say in closing this contribution on behalf of the Government to this important debate is that by working together as a Parliament, we can create more opportunities for our people, strengthen our regions and power Scotland's future economy. And we welcome this opportunity to discuss those really important matters in the Chamber today.
Thank you, Minister. I now call on Lorna Slater to speak to and to move Amendment 19253.2. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I move the amendment in my name. We can all agree on the vital importance of skills and training. We know that the ability to obtain these substantially determine the opportunities in life and, collectively, the success and dynamism of our economy. What we are debating today is how best to use public funds and resources to support skills and training in Scotland. There is no doubt that in times of constrained public spending, that more money can't be the only answer. We need to properly explore the art of the possible, just one moment, and how to make the most impact with the resources that are available. Certainly, I'll take the
Craig Hoy.
Government she was a member of received £875 million from HMRC, were raised through HMRC from Scottish employers for the apprenticeship levy. But yet, during that same period, only £700 million was actually spent on apprenticeships in Scotland. Where did that money go?
Lorna Slater.
I do share Craig Hoy's frustration with the lack of transparency around how apprenticeship levy funds are handled. However, I note to the member that those funds are not kept ring-fenced in any way and then end up as part of the block grant to the Scottish Government. So they must be accounted for in the budget. And of course, we all understand the budgeting constraints that the Scottish Government is under. But I understand the member's frustration. I have been encouraged by the current impetus for increasing and improving workplace learning in Scotland. I certainly felt that I learned more in the years that I spent working for engineering firms as part of my university's co-op programme than I ever did in any classroom. In addition to providing valuable experience, workplace learning is an opportunity for employers, businesses and organisations to contribute to skills development in Scotland for the benefit of their own businesses. All the heavy lifting here cannot and should not be done by the public purse. There should be an expectation of employers and investors that they have some responsibility for training and development of their staff. After all, they are the ones who are generating profit from their staff. Investing in their people is for their own benefit. In my region and portfolio work, I hear many good things from employers about the value of taking on apprentices, and many good things from apprentices themselves. But I also hear frustrations. Employers are frustrated that colleges are inflexible in their offerings, meaning apprentices have to wait months for the school year to start in order to get the course they need. The courses are offered, sorry, I need to make headway. The courses are offered on limited, inflexible days, so that apprentices' work weeks are inefficient and their travel and childcare expenses are increased as a result. Employers who can afford to do so have therefore started using private training providers to overcome these problems and develop bespoke courses. Private training providers can afford the latest equipment and will teach specific skills, how to install a heat pump, for example, rather than the college, who will include heat pumps as part of a broader plumbing course, which doesn't necessarily meet the need of that apprentice. In some cases, though, private training provision is very questionable, while in others it works well. I spoke to one apprentice who was apprenticed to a local authority, the local authority had designated themselves as both employer and training provider. This apprentice had no formal training standards or provision, and no one to turn to complain about this state of affairs. No independent evaluation of her learning or what the quality of training that she was receiving. If she complained to the local authority about the poor training provision, she risked failing her apprenticeship, and we are failing apprentices like her. I have already spoken in this chamber about the gender disparities amongst apprenticeships, and I suspect also in college course provision. Men get apprenticeships that put them into well-paid sectors. Women are channeled into low-paid sectors, which may trap them for a lifetime of inequality. We cannot be supporting this on the public dime. Mechanisms must be put into place to ensure that women have equal opportunity to gain skills and employment in well-paid sectors. It begs the question as to why we use public money to support certain apprenticeships and college courses at all, if the result is that
you will need to conclude.
People graduating from those do not achieve well-paid work. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Slater. I now call on Daniel Johnson to open on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. It actually gives me great pleasure to follow on from Lorna Slater. I think I actually made a number of very useful insights, and indeed I think this is a very useful debate. Dare I say it stands in contrast to the previous motion brought forward in by the Conservatives, because this is a debate that's not really important, but it's a motion based on the facts. And I think that's really important. This is an issue too important to ignore the facts, which is why we did not bring forward an amendment to that, because I think it's important we let the facts speak for themselves. That a 20% real terms cut in funding is something of concern, and speaks to the direction of the skills system in this country, which is vital if we are going to achieve economic growth, which was, I think, a case made very strongly and in a very matter-of-fact way by Murdo Fraser, in contrast to the presentation, the person who beat him to the Scottish Conservative leadership. One wonders what might have happened if history had been different. But I think it also stands in contrast to the government's presentation, and we cannot support the government's amendment because, and I say this with some trepidation, it is misleading. First of all, the use of the figure of 39,000 in training would make you think that we've seen an increase in the number of people in apprenticeships, but we know the number of starts and completions has never recovered from its pre-pandemic levels. But it's also misleading in another way, because it's not the most up-to-date number. We have had a subsequent iteration of those statistics, and the current number is actually 37,215. So I would gently say to Mr Macpherson, because he's someone who I deeply respect, this is not a good start to his time in this role. I know he is someone that is a seriously minded person, I believe him when he states what he wants to do in terms of this job, the importance of the skills. But you do not treat Audit Scotland's work with seriousness if you expunge its key findings, which is what this motion, what the government's amendment does to this motion. Nor do you treat this subject seriously by essentially using misleading figures. Because let's be clear, we do have a serious situation. I think, in part, led by, I think, a very mismanaged and poorly handled college reform agenda by this government. Because there's no good for this government to essentially say we work in partnership with the college. This government brought colleges under direct control, hobbled their financial flexibility, again, essentially made it impossible for them to deliver part-time courses. So simply sort of stand to one side and wring hands about the state of the college sector when they brought them under direct control simply is just not credible. We know that we have 30,000 fewer Scots getting places in colleges. We also know that some of the more flexible funding that was available through the Flexible Workforce Development Fund has been withdrawn. And this is all fundamentally linked to a college funding regime that everyone knows, and you talk to anyone in the sector, knows is well past due the point where it needs reform. The college credit system, and I know this is getting a bit technical, is frankly, if you look at it in any detail, is no longer fit for purpose. And if we were going to have a serious debate, we'd be having a look at those deficiencies.
No, I'm afraid the member has got 30 seconds or so.
But just in closing, I would like to also reiterate the points that Murdo Fraser made. That we need to look at reform. We need to look about how we flex our training and apprenticeship system, much as Lorna Slater has said. And the problem with the tertiary education bill, it is a reshuffling of quangos without any clarity about direction, strategy, or what is intended in terms of outcomes in terms of the skill system. And for those reasons, we would be supporting the unamended motion from the Conservatives, and this is why we oppose the tertiary education bill in its current form. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I now call on Willie Rennie to open on behalf of the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Up to 4 minutes, please.
I feel so much better in this half of the debate because we've got the acceptable face of the Conservative Party back on the front bench again, giggling away, enjoying themselves. This is what we prefer to see rather than the previous debate. I've also got two bits of positive news. First of all, we should celebrate the fact that there is high demand for apprenticeships. That is a positive thing. That businesses are wanting to take on people of all ages into apprenticeship programmes. That's a great thing. Way in excess of what we're supplying, but it's a positive thing. There is hunger for a growing workforce amongst those companies, and that's a good thing. The second thing is that, thanks to the Liberal Democrats in the last budget negotiations, we pursued £3.5 million for skills support in offshore wind and social care. Two things that are progressing. So we should celebrate both of those things. But that's where the good news ends. First of all, as we've heard this afternoon repeatedly, not just now, repeatedly, is the Audit Scotland report, which is one of many reports which should cause the Minister, who's just new into his post, to shiver. Because a 20% cut in real terms over just the last 5 years. Just the last 5 years. Then we have the Scottish Funding Council delayed sustainability report, but they have identified that most colleges are not financially sustainable and some are on the verge of financial insolvency. That should be enough to keep the Minister awake at night. And then the cuts to student numbers, 12%, staff numbers, 8%. So the capacity of those colleges has been reduced as well. And they predict more is yet to come unless steps are taken. And this is on top of a record over the last, I would say, 15 years, roundabout since the regionalisation programme, where colleges have been successively cut over the years at every opportunity. And I don't think it's because the Government Minister really wants to cut college funding, but when he's faced with a number of other choices, it just doesn't compete as far as he's concerned. It doesn't have the political weight. It doesn't have the attractiveness politically for the government. And that's why they're always at the end of the queue when there is money to go around. I'll take an intervention. Yeah.
Murdo Fraser.
I'm grateful to Mr Rennie for giving way. I wonder if he shares my concern, I'm sure he does, about what's happening at the Elmwood campus of the SRUC in Cooper, where, thanks to cutbacks, we see a downgrading of courses and courses being removed, potentially threatening the entire viability of that campus, which is so important to people locally. Does he share my concern? Willie Rennie?
Absolutely. And SRUC is one of those hybrid institutions, which is both HE and FE, but it's seen the closure of its main building, the sell-off of the farm, the closure of the student accommodation, the golf course is gone effectively. All of those under the watch of the SNP government. And they're not alone, because we've seen with Fife College, where they've been concerned about cuts there, Forth Valley with Alloa, UHI, I was on a meeting last week with the EIS FILA, who were very concerned about the changes there, Dundee and Angus, £2.5 million savings they're having to make this year. Courses cut, student numbers down, and buildings have been closed. That's happening right across the country. So I think the Minister can no longer claim certain things. First of all, that he's creating opportunity for people from disadvantaged backgrounds, because colleges are often the route out of poverty, the route into a good job and a route into a good life. But those, by the cuts to those colleges, those opportunities are being reduced. That colleges are important with the particular unique Scottish route through FE into HE. That route is particularly Scottish and is a great advantage, but they can no longer claim credit for that. Parity of esteem no longer can be regarded as a priority for the government. They are not meeting even the demands on the apprenticeship scheme. That's why this government needs to realise that it's not fulfilling its rhetoric. All it is words, and the reality is that we're just facing cuts.
Thank you, Mr Rennie. We will now move to the open debate. Backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes. I call Miles Briggs to be followed by Paul McLennan.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. There's not a week that goes past that I do not have a meeting with an organisation or speak to a business here in my Lothian region where the issues of skills shortages in our economy is not raised. And that's something I'm sure every single MSP will also have in the chamber. How we redirect the focus of our education system to deliver on this challenge is not going to be easy, and will require not only a national effort but also some difficult decisions to realign the future demand our country faces, not only in terms of key industries and sectors but also to meet the demographic changes facing our country. As many briefings ahead of today have stated, there's a significant unmet demand for places, apprenticeships and courses. That should focus all our minds on how we build a system that can deliver for them. In June, the principals of Ayrshire College and Glasgow Kelvin College gave evidence to the Education, Children and Young People's Committee, and Angela Fox from Ayrshire College noted the college was unable to award a place to 764 students who had passed interviews, and Joanna Campbell from Glasgow Kelvin College noted the college is only accepting 1 out of every 3 applicants. So we know that the current system is not delivering on demand. The Scottish Government funded 25,507 modern apprenticeship places in 24-25, but demand exceeded these funded places for learning. I think there is a cross-party consensus that we need a new approach, but that the Scottish Government's tertiary education and training bill is not going to deliver not only the better system, but the vision for apprenticeships that we all want to see. And as Murdo Fraser has stated, the SNP's response to this mess is just simply to mess around with quangos, transferring responsibility for apprenticeships for the national programme from Skills Development Scotland to the Scottish Funding Council. I don't believe that is the right move at present time. And I agree with the concerns being expressed by CBI Scotland and the Scottish Chamber of Commerce, namely that the bill currently presents the potential to dismantle what already works and leaves employers in the dark in relation to the future of apprenticeship schemes and our wider workforce system. Presiding Officer, as others have touched on, I also believe it's important that we see transparency over the spending of the apprenticeship levy here in Scotland. In recent weeks, the Scottish Government have been accused of raiding £171 million from that scheme. Now, SNP ministers have only spent £704 million of the £875 million raised. Businesses are rightly asking where the rest of the money from the levy has gone and why we've not seen vital training opportunities delivered in Scotland. As Michelle Ferguson, the director of CBI, has stated, businesses are paying in, but they're not seeing a return. We need full transparency on how the levy and reserves raised in Scotland are spent in Scotland. Presiding Officer, the SNP's record on colleges is shameful. We need to admit that today, and I hope the Government will understand that. We have seen a 20% cut in real terms funding, the loss of over 100,000 places, waiting lists at record levels, and the credit system in crisis. Where councils are trying to deliver flexibility, they are not being given the opportunity to take on more students. The new net zero opportunities we've been told about at committee in the North East, the North East College, will not actually see any more credit. So government need to look at how we can achieve more and how our college sector can deliver. But above all, Deputy Presiding Officer, we need to see a skills revolution in Scotland. That is why Scottish Conservatives are leading the debate for change and want to see a significant increase in the number of modern apprenticeship places by 10,000 to boost economic growth, create jobs and allow businesses to expand. Working with our college sector and businesses, we can meet the aspirations of our young people and deliver on the shortages which are facing our workforce and our economy. And I support the amendment in Murdo Fraser's name.
Thank you, Mr Briggs. I call Paul McLennan, to be followed by Jamie Harcourt-Johnson. Mr McLennan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. No one in this chamber doubts that Scotland's economic success depends on people, on the skills, the talent and ambition, obviously, of our workforce. To build a fair, resilient economy, we need more than slogans about growth. We need investment in people, in fair work and in the systems that help them thrive. And that's what the Scottish Government has been doing. Despite a decade of Westminster austerity that has cut Scotland's capital and resource budgets in real terms year after year. But let's look at some of the fundamentals. 93% of school leavers have a positive destination. And the Scottish Government has provided apprenticeships and training to a record 39,000 individuals. No one, including Tory MSPs, can explain away the impact of Brexit, and no one, including Labour MSPs, can argue that the UK Government's migration system is contributing to key skills gaps and labour market shortages. Both parties lie down to the Farage narrative. The Conservatives' motion talks about restoring college funding and expanding apprenticeships. Worthy aims, but it's worth reminding the Chamber that its economic decisions have stripped more than £1.6 billion from Scotland's spending power since 21-22. Now, even in those circumstances, Scotland's approach to skills is working. The National Strategy for Economic Transformation, the Fair Work Action Plan and the Skills Delivery Landscape Review are aligning education, business and government to deliver the workforce that Scotland needs. And the Minister talked about the Energy Skills Partnership and the work that they are doing, and that's very relevant to my own constituency in East Lothian. The Scottish Government has also protected more than 25,000 apprenticeship places, prioritising sectors that are driving future growth. Renewables, I've only got 4 minutes, Mr Hoy. Renewables, digital, health and social care, construction and engineering. Apprenticeships in Scotland aren't just about filling vacancies, they're about building a fair, productive and inclusive economy. Now, our colleges have been at the forefront for that, supporting young people, career changes and those furthest from labour market to access opportunities that change lives. Now, I've seen firsthand how colleges support my own constituency, working with local employers. My own local college, Edinburgh College, has stated that the south east of Scotland is the fastest growing in Scotland. 84% of Scotland's population growth in the next 10 years will be in Edinburgh and the south east of Scotland, with East Lothian forecast to grow by a third. The Edinburgh College also stated that they support the reform as proposed in the tertiary education bill. And they also state it's imperative that apprenticeship provision is expanded if we are to take advantage of the substantial economic opportunities that come from the region's demographic growth. Now, last year the college carried out its skills survey research with regional employers. And what they said is that 88% of employers saying that some of their vacancies are hard to fill due to difficulties finding applicants with the required skills, knowledge and or experience. So it's important that we looked at the reforms that the government is proposing in that particular regard. Now, a strong college sector is a key driver to economic success in East Lothian and Scotland to take these opportunities forward. Now, contrast with the Conservatives' record, scrapping free tuition, cutting investment in lifelong learning and tying the hands of devolved governments through austerity budgets. It's not a credible lecture on opportunity, it's an exercise in economic hypocrisy. But let's be clear, Scotland's skills system is being held back not by a lack of ambition or ability, but by a lack of powers. We don't control migration to fill skill gaps, we can't borrow to invest strategically in college estates, and we don't get a fair return from energy resources from our own streets. This is why independence matters. It's not a distraction from economic priorities. It's an essential step to deliver them with full powers. Scotland can invest directly in the skills that underpin a fair work nation, where every earner works a decent wage, has security and shares in the prosperity they help to create. Presiding Officer, the SNP will always back investment in skills and apprenticeships and in real work. But the choice before us is simple. Do we want to manage decline under Westminster austerity or build opportunity with the powers of independence? I know which side of I am on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McLennan. I now call Jamie Halker-Johnson to be followed by Michael Mara. Mr Halker-Johnson.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in today's debate. As many will know, I served a happy period as my party's Shadow Skills Minister, and it gave me plenty of opportunity to meet regularly with representatives from the sector, undertake visits around the country, and to see first-hand some of the incredible things that can be done with skills and training. What it underlined to me was that, as we've heard from colleagues today, a skilled workforce is the central driver of a successful economy. But it also highlighted the many shortcomings in the system that we have today. Because this is a system that is clearly struggling rather than thriving, one that is expected to do more with less time and time again. The sector is no stranger to being deprioritised and defunded, but perhaps more than any other public service, it has been forced to sit through endless strategies and action plans that talk big but achieve so little. All while every stakeholder involved knows that the budgets are being sliced to the bone, and rhetoric from ministers rarely, if ever, matches delivery. It was once a popular cry from the SNP benches that this Parliament lacked economic levers. Well, I believe that education and skills are, without doubt, some of the greatest economic levers you can pull. But this government's record tells us what they think about that proposition. Because it's a record that has left a majority of employers highlighting the key skill shortages and struggles to recruit. A college sector that is being asked to find even greater savings, with the inevitable result of shrinking provisional and holes in budgets. And increasingly a lack of real choice for Scotland's young people and all those who want to train and learn beyond school. Last week's Audit Scotland report on Scotland's colleges was damning. It tells a tale not only of funding cuts by this government, but of colleges forced to make savings by decimating their workforce, risks that courses simply will not run, and a bleak financial outlook for the future. We should not hold back, and we must not hold back, from saying quite clearly that is a future with fewer opportunities across the board. Audit Scotland notes that one concern voiced by colleges is competition with universities. I've spoken in this chamber before about the risk of treating university as a default destination. Even today, there is often a clear divide in many people's mind between academic on one hand and vocational on the other, and judgments made on their respective value. For many school leavers, the full scale of options available, perhaps the conventional routes, often remain unknown. We foist a great deal of expectation on our young people in their teenage years. Choose subjects, choose a degree, choose a career. While some may have a great deal of certainty at that stage of their life, most do not. That's why I have advocated for an improved approach to careers guidance in our schools, matching people with the apprenticeships, training courses and qualifications they need to succeed is not something optional extra, not some optional extra. It must be the bedrock of our economic strategy. But equally, skills must not only be seen through the lens of young people. I'm sure many of us can look around at friends and colleagues who are now in completely different jobs and careers than when they first set out. Yet there remains a stubborn gap in provision for retraining. It is by no means original to say that the promise of lifelong learning that has been often heard in this chamber has been consistently more soundbite than reality. But an attempt to make it a genuine part of Scotland's skills landscape will be increasingly essential if people are able to navigate an economy that is faster changing than ever before, and where existing skills can become redundant quickly, where people may need to more support to progress, or policies that recognise the need to learn while earning in a more flexible way. Presiding Officer, I'm not optimistic about the direction this government has gone down on skills, training and colleges. While I welcome this government now, having thrown off the shackles of the Greens' anti-business ideology, seems at least to acknowledge that the economy exists, is one that is failing to engage with economic growth and the challenges of productivity in any meaningful way. We'll face an economic transformation in the coming years, whether the Scottish Government sees it coming or not. And there is a great deal to do. But first, it requires a government that will give the skills and college sector the support that they deserve. Thank you,
Mr Halker-Johnson. I now call Michael Mara to be followed by Gordon MacDonald. Mr Mara.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I can think of a few policy areas that sum up this knackered SNP government and the state of Scotland's colleges. For years, colleges have asked the government to give them a clear purpose as part of a wider economy and skills system. The Audit Scotland report in 2022 was damning of the lack of leadership from this government. for the skills system generally. That's part of the reason we're meant to have this tertiary reform bill in front of us. The Cumberford Little report has sat on a shelf gathering dust for half a decade. For years, colleges have warned about the impact of budget cuts, and yes, the SNP have delivered them time and again. In 2022, Audit Scotland warned that change is needed to ensure the college sector is financially sustainable in the long term. They made the same warnings in 2023. And again in 2024. And just last week, the Auditor-General continued banging his head against the SNP brick wall and gave his damning verdict for 2025. Setting aside the spin and the bluster, he's confirmed that since 2021-22, there's been a staggering 20% real terms cut in funding to college budgets. And it is, I'm afraid, a lamentable start to the Minister's tenure in office, and regrettable that he's deleted, no thank you sir, he's deleted the entirety of that analysis from Audit Scotland, from the motion that's in front of us today, and he doesn't accept. Does he, and I'm glad he's on his feet. Does he accept what's written by Audit Scotland? Does he accept their verdict?
Minister.
Mr Maher is somebody I respect, as I do Mr Fraser. And I think if they look at the amendment that the Scottish Government have submitted, it notes the Audit Scotland report. So,
it's one thing to note that it exists. It's another thing to actually, in the opening speech that the Minister gave, to ignore entirely the analysis that it sets out, and in the rest of the amendment that's set down, is to say that actually the problems of this are Brexit, frankly, and supposedly some form of continuing austerity. Because people are asking, the additional £5.2 billion of spending that came to this government in the budget that just passed from the UK, what on earth has happened to the money? No thank you. The Minister's had his chance. But at the same time, he's launching a cross-sector conversation, his government, on the sustainability of the university funding model. We now hear that there might be a similar conversation for colleges, but perversely that's happening while they're pushing through a bill in this Parliament that deals with the tertiary education sector, and it fails to reference any of that work as to how these things might interact. And the idea that you can deal with one part of the tertiary sector without thinking about the others is frankly ridiculous. It guarantees further damage. The dual crisis in our college and universities, our universities and our colleges are inextricably linked. What the Minister has to understand is when more universities go into clearing, and they miss out on the colleges miss out on hundreds of students and hundreds of thousands of pounds. The principal of Dundee and Angus College in the press just this week is telling that exact story. That's an award-winning college, one of the best in the whole country, but it's suffered year on year of cuts. 1 in 8 members of staff have lost their jobs, and they're looking at a further £2.3 million of cuts in this year. And the Minister has to recognise that it was his government that took all those colleges into direct control of his government. These are the decisions. So he has to actually be able to tell us, where does he think that the college should make the cuts? Because this is a systemic mess, and it's grotesquely incompetent, and worst of all, it was entirely foreseen. When I stood here in the chamber and warned about the unsustainability of the university funding model, I was shouted down by the First Minister, and the SNP press office put out memes with my face on it. That was their response to try and shut down debate. It's a deeply unserious government that is refusing to confront the issues that are staring them in the face, as they're doing today in the chamber. The Minister has to accept that today he must actually realise that his tenure comes at the end of 20 years of the SNP's wilful neglect of Scotland's colleges, the fag end of a knackered government. Less staff, fewer students, fewer courses, fewer opportunities, and our economy weakened and our communities diminished.
Thank you, Mr Maher. And I call Gordon MacDonald. Mr MacDonald.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Since 2020, Scotland's construction workforce has increased from 226,000 to 240,000, but high turnover and retirements are straining capacity. The CITB in June this year highlighted that the industry must recruit 48,000 people by 2034 to meet demand. By comparison, there are 39,000 modern apprenticeships in training across Scotland, with 25% of them being in construction-related occupations. So yes, we need more construction apprenticeships, especially now that Brexit has discouraged European workers from coming to not only Scotland but the whole of the UK. However, we should remember that an apprenticeship is a work-based learning programme, meaning the individual must be employed by a company to begin training, but will benefit from earning a wage while they work and study at college. In my constituency of Edinburgh Pentlands, I've met young people eager to learn a trade who are ready to contribute to their communities, but they are too often met with closed doors, as our small and medium-sized enterprises, which make up 98% of Scotland's construction sector, often lack the resources to take on apprentices, especially as companies are struggling when faced with increased construction material inflation of 37% since 2020, plus a recent national insurance hike costing educational institutions £50 million, which is Labour's tax on creating jobs. There is, of course, the apprenticeship employer grant, which can provide up to £7,500 per apprentice. In addition, since 2006, apprenticeship completion rates have improved from being around 50% to nearly 80% today, significantly higher than in England, with sustained employment of 89% among apprentices who complete their apprenticeship. But unfortunately, we still see firms hesitant to make that commitment to invest in apprenticeships. However, there are encouraging signs that some companies are trying to fill that skills gap by employing more apprentices. For example, Keir Construction, who won the contract to build Scotland's first passive standard secondary school incorporating a swimming pool in my constituency of Edinburgh Pentlands, created a total of 42 apprenticeships during the building of Curry Community High. In addition, Keir dedicated over 400 hours to delivering educational outreach to secondary pupils from local schools in the hope they would consider a job in construction that went into the world of work. Wester Hailes High School piloted a new construction pathway last academic year, alongside support from the Scottish Traditional Building Forum and Edinburgh Council. The Nat 5 Creative Industries and Roof Slating was so successful it has been repeated this year, along with a Nat 5 Creative Industries and Stone Carving. By giving these courses the same parity of STEAM with academic subjects, we are encouraging young people to consider a career in construction. Edinburgh College at their Granton Construction Campus has state-of-the-art workshops and Construction Industry Training Board approved training areas. They emphasise hands-on learning and realistic workshops, including simulated sites for bricklaying, roofing and site management. The benefits for companies are that in year one, apprentices perform basic tasks under supervision, reducing workload for skills tradespersons. By year two, apprentices take on semi-independent tasks, handling routine jobs. Then from year three onwards, apprentices work near independent, complex tasks and achieving SVQ level 3. They then qualify as tradespeople. It is estimated at this point companies will start to see returns on investment, with apprentices generating income for employers of between £30,000 and £50,000 a year. So we have the training facilities and the young people with an interest in construction. We just need employers, despite the challenges, to invest in their business's future.
Thank you, Ms MacDonald. We now move to closing speeches. I would advise that there is no time in hand. I call Lawrence Slater to close on behalf of the Scottish Greens. Up to 4 minutes, please.
In my opening remarks, I shared some of my frustrations that I have heard around apprenticeships and colleges. And I think that there's a lot we can do to improve both of these. I am hopeful that the implementation of the Withers Review will shake some of this out and bring the strategy and dynamism to this sector that is desperately needed. College governance needs to be improved to prevent poor management decisions. Colleges need to be more flexible and adaptable in changing to changing needs for skill provision, and the need to work more closely with employers. Some colleges are doing an excellent job of this, but some are not. And even while they're struggling, we must recognise that the contribution that colleges are making is substantial and vital. While I wish we could solely focus on improving college and other education and training provision, I fear we are in a situation where we must more urgently work very hard to prevent its imminent decline. My sympathies are with college staff across the country who face uncertainty about their future. There is huge uncertainty about the future of many of our local colleges. The University and College Union announced last night that staff at the University of Highlands and Islands are likely to strike over planned redundancies. It is so important to retain the current structure of local units to keep further education colleges in places across the Highlands and Islands. This meets local needs and provides effective tertiary education, giving both further education and higher education equal importance. When Forth Valley College announced proposals to close the facility in Alloa with an explanation that the three-campus model was no longer sustainable, a rally took place attended by politicians, staff and students. Local colleges allow people to access further education who would otherwise be excluded. It simply isn't possible for many people to travel long distances to study or to live away from home. We need to stop imagining that all students are young people moving out of their parents' home to study. We need to imagine them as people who have jobs and families, who need to upskill while still getting home every night and putting in enough solid shifts to pay the rent every week. We need to imagine them as disabled people who cannot travel far. We need to imagine them as having the complex and varied lives that people actually have, all who need skills and training to thrive and seize opportunities. This is the challenge ahead of us, to make skills and training available to more people under more flexible circumstances. We need to rethink how these are taught and what is taught using public money to meet our strategic aims, as well as to increase opportunity and reduce inequality. We know that we have national skills shortages relating to our transition to a green and net zero economy. It would make sense to prioritise our limited funds in this direction. We can start with the basics. Colleges should be living wage employers. Apprentices should be paid living wages. We cannot build a better economy on the backs of people being paid poverty wages. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Slater. And I now call Pam Duncan-Glancy to close on behalf of Scottish Labour. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. This evening, Scottish Labour will support the motion because the core point in it is crucial and Parliament should speak as one on it. Colleges have been hammered, and with them, so have the life chances of thousands of young people and others in Scotland. Audit Scotland is clear. Enrolments are falling, targeted funds are being pulled, and the funding model nudges colleges to cheaper credits instead of what local economies actually need. That student satisfaction remains above 90% is not a pat on the back moment for the SNP government. It is a tribute to staff holding the line while funding has not. Colleges, students and employers have been sounding alarm bells for years, yet when the auditor publishes the report, all we get from the government is an amendment to entirely delete the reality and instead pat itself on the back and point fingers. As my colleague Daniel Johnson said, this is not a good start from the new minister. They are in outright denial, and their continual failure to connect with reality will let down yet more staff and students and curtail futures. We hear from ministers about the tough fiscal climate and a 2.6% teaching uplift. Let's be straight. A one-year cash tweak doesn't undo 5 years of a 20% real terms hit. It should, as Willie Rennie says, cause the government to shiver. And only this SNP government could spend £5.2 billion extra in a budget as a tough deal. If there truly was continued investment, principals wouldn't be cancelling courses, freezing recruitment and preparing for deficit budgets. The system itself tells us we need, as others have said, at least 34,000 apprenticeships to match Scotland's growth ambitions, but we're delivering just over 25,000 modern apprenticeships. Presiding Officer, we're running with the handbrake on, and while that gap persists, 1 in 6 young people, 16.1%, are not in education, employment or training. That's untapped talent and projects slipping back for lack of labour. And if the SNP wonder why the Fiscal Commission tells them that we've got an economic potential gap, they need look no further than that. But, Presiding Officer, colleges aren't just simply lines in a spreadsheet. They're Glasgow's engine room, and Aberdeen's, and Dundee's, Inverness's and our rural communities too. They're where a school leaver learns a trade and where an adult learner retrains for a new career, as Lorna Slater and others pointed out, and it's where key services and industries renew their skills. But, Presiding Officer, if you squeeze colleges, you squeeze social mobility and you choke growth. And while the government points fingers elsewhere, it is the SNP's funding decisions and cap on apprenticeship numbers, which ministers here control, that are holding Scotland back. And having listened to the government benches tonight, if they're denying there's even a problem, it's no wonder none of them could give us a single solution. They are not the ones to fix it. But, Presiding Officer, Scottish Labour recognise the struggle of colleges, and we have a plan to help them. We'll restore sustainable funding so colleges can plan beyond a single year. We'll lift modern apprenticeship places, speed up approval of new frameworks and make routes more flexible. We'll put industry and our population needs at the heart, giving levy payers and SMEs a real say.
The member will be concluding shortly.
And we'll start earlier in our schools too, because skills aren't just an add-on to exams, they are critical opportunities and critical to opportunity. We'll grow practical learning, modern careers advice and proper work-based pathways. Presiding officer, this is about basic competence. It's about funding the places we have to match the demand we need, and on this the SNP have failed. Presiding officer, this is about backing our colleges, and when we do that, Scotland will feel the lift in pay packets and in productivity and in pride. So let's give our young people the certainty and the opportunities they deserve, and our workforces the careers and skills they deserve. Let's back our colleges, let's back our apprentices, let's back Scotland's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan-Clancy. I now call on Minister Richard Lockhead to close on behalf of the Scottish Government. Up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. There's been many points made in this debate, and I'm going to try and address some of them and also rebut some of the claims that have been made by other parties in relation to our very vibrant college sector in Scotland. And of course, Murdo Fraser started by talking down the Scottish economy, but whilst we agree that it's very tough out there just now in many, many ways, let's not forget that since 2007, GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% compared to 6.8% in the UK, and productivity has grown at an average rate of 0.9% per year compared to 0.3% in the rest of the UK as well.
Murdo Fraser.
It's up as well.
To the Minister for giving way. I wasn't talking anything down. I was quoting from the survey published this morning by the Scottish Chambers of Commerce and the Fraser of Allender. Why won't you listen to them if you won't listen to me?
Always through the Chair, Minister.
I'd always rather listen to them than listen to yourself, with all due respect.
Always through the Chair, please.
I take on board it's very challenging out there, and our colleges have got such a crucial role to play in making sure we've got the skills for the future economy, and we're helping young people go on the ladder in life and open up new opportunities and new horizons as well. And I want to congratulate the colleges, our schools and training providers for what they're achieving just now. In the academic year 24-25, 110,380 vocational technical qualifications and awards were issued. That's a new landmark. It was 21.6% up on the year before. So congratulations to all our education providers who helped achieve that as well. And also, as Ben McPherson said in his opening remarks, 93% of school leavers have a positive destination. That is something to celebrate. And in relation to the 39,000 individuals mentioned in the Scottish Government's amendment, that Daniel Johnson said was misleading Parliament. Can I just explain to him that's a very accurate figure? The figure he quoted was the first quarter of this year. The figure we quote is the whole year figure for last year, because quite clearly the figures change throughout the year. Therefore, you have to use the annual figure and not the quarterly figure. So our figure is accurate, and we were not misleading Parliament. I'd like to put on record the amazing work that our colleges are doing in Scotland. I have to say I had the honour of attending the 15th anniversary gala dinner with the First Minister and many other people. I was an alumnus of the City of Glasgow College, which took place just a few weeks ago. I attended the predecessor college, the Central College of Commerce in Glasgow, in the mid-80s, and was a lot younger than what I am now, and I graduated with an HNC in Business Studies at that time, and here I am standing in 2025 as Minister for Business in the Scottish Government. So I've certainly benefited from my time at college, as have hundreds of thousands of young people across Scotland over the years as well. And I visited Glasgow Kelvin College just a few weeks ago. I was blown away by what they're doing in terms of innovation and making sure we've got the skills for the 21st century and teaching young people in that area what they require for the new economy, and working with 6 hubs in the innovation organisation involving a number of colleges there as well, who have received UK funding to take forward their innovation agenda, and it's great to see that collaboration as well. I also had the privilege of recently visiting Fife College and their fantastic new campus at Dunfermline that's been built, and they're excited about the future as well. So there's a lot of positivity out there. I'll take a brief intervention.
Rachel Hamilton.
For taking the intervention. However, he sets out that he had an HND in business and had an opportunity which is driving the economy and finding him a job. However, people in the borders, young people, the courses are being limited and they're not able to get on courses. They can't get jobs and the economy will suffer.
Yeah.
Minister.
Can I just say that the leader of the UK Conservative Party was in the news over the last couple of days suggesting £47 billion of cuts to public spending. So the Conservative Party are here today arguing for more spending and more spending, or in this case in terms of further education, but at the same time they're arguing for a cut in public spending. You can't have it both ways. This is a very, very challenging time. This is a very, very challenging time for public spending in Scotland. As you all know, it's been extremely challenging for the last few years. We do have budget negotiations coming up in the next few weeks. The Conservative Party, the Labour Party will have an ideal opportunity to argue for greater budgets for the many different issues they bring to the Chamber where they want bigger budgets. And at the same time, of course, they'll be able to outline where they want cuts to take place to make sure we can fund those increases they keep arguing for as well. I just want to finish, Presiding Officer, by saying that there are a number of issues that have made life very challenging for colleges over the last few years. Every time Brexit's mentioned, the Conservative Party in particular shake their heads and pretend it's irrelevant. If you speak to any college in Scotland, and indeed, of course, universities and all of the further and higher education sector, they will talk about Brexit and the impact it's had both in skills in Scotland, which Miles Brigg, I think, mentioned, and many other members as well. They'll all mention it, as well as the financial hit they've taken, and a number of students have been unable to come easily that used to come from European countries, not just universities, but to colleges in the context of this debate as well. And the idea that rising energy bills, responsibility of the UK Government, the Trust budget, which came from the Conservative Party as well, the National Insurance contributions increase that came from the Labour Government, that they don't have an impact on the finances of colleges, is ridiculous. Of course it does, and that's what we're coping with, a very tough subject, but we'll continue to stand up for Scotland's colleges as we move forward, and I urge Parliament to back the Scottish Government amendment.
Thank you, Minister. I now call on Liz Smith to close the debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives. Up to 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Just recently, the Deputy First Minister described colleges as the engines of innovation, while she was announcing new schemes to help turn research initiatives into high-growth businesses. And that was a point that was very strongly welcomed by Scotland's Chief Entrepreneur, Anna Stewart. And that was on the back of the Deputy First Minister's Panmure House speech back in June, when she spoke very well about the need for greater collaboration between the public and private sectors to try to harness Scotland's true investment and economic growth potential. Now, in that context, this Parliament, as Willie Rennie reminded us, there is the huge importance of colleges when it comes to stimulating economic growth, which is why last week we had Audit Scotland describing colleges as a vital anchor in local communities and regional economies. So let's hear what college principals are saying, and I quote, "To think that the sector could operate or indeed maintain provision after having our budget slashed by 10% last year was challenging, but to have them reduced yet again is just baffling." Minister, that college principal was Mike Dibsell of Telford College, and he said it at the Education Committee back in 2011. And, Minister, sitting beside you, that is well before Brexit. And yet, since then, despite all the rhetoric that we've had from various higher and further education ministers, we have seen an erosion of college sustainability. Here's a college principal now, John Vincent of Glasgow Clyde College, telling the cross-party group on colleges and universities just last week that demand is so strong for apprenticeship places, but that can't be met because of Scottish Government cuts. In other words, the SNP, with the financial constraints on colleges, is actually preventing some people from taking up work. We've got problems at Forth Valley College, in the Alloa campus, in the very kind of area that we desperately need new training opportunities. We've got Fife College, we've got UHR harbouring very serious concerns about long-term sustainability, all of which put in jeopardy valuable opportunities that should be designed to stimulate growth. Because if we are to be serious about addressing economic inactivity, improving skills and retraining, creating a more innovative and flexible labour market, then it should go without saying our colleges should be a priority for government. What makes no sense at all is to cut their budgets in real terms by 20% since 2021 and stripping out £141 million in real terms from the Scottish Funding Council. And that is at a time, despite what Mr McLennan says, when the overall block grant has been going up. Right. As has already been said in this debate, colleges and other providers wanted 34,000 places in 24-25, and the Scottish Government gave them 25,500. And we get a body like Engineering Scotland telling us that they think a fifth of the skills demand has been unmet due to real terms funding cuts. There is absolutely no policy logic to that at all, just as there is no policy logic in the SNP budget of 2 years ago, which cut the economy portfolio by 8.3% in real terms, including employability and enterprise support and tourism. Because we know that over half of businesses are experiencing skills shortages, with a high percentage of these very pessimistic about the next 5 years. Nor is there any policy logic in persistently increasing tax levels in Scotland, despite the evidence of employers, whether these are large-scale businesses like Tesco or our smallest businesses in our high streets, or given what the Fraser Vallender and Chambers of Commerce were saying yesterday, because it's very clear that these tax policies are hindering our capacity to drive growth. But what is really important here, and it has been for a long, long time, is that the funding model for both tertiary and higher education is just not sustainable, and it needs to change, as Michael Mara and Lorna Slater both said. We simply cannot have a situation where 22 out of 24 colleges expect to spend more than their income this year, and where the funding for a college student is £2,500, a little bit more than that, lower than it is for a higher education student. Now, I completely understand that there can't be full parity, but neither should there be such a huge gap in income. Because likewise, we have a situation whereby some apprenticeship frameworks in colleges, they're being subtracted to deliver the training, but only 40% of the Scottish Government funding actually reaches the college, which is delivering the training. That just can't be right. So on these benches, for the sake of boosting the quality of Scottish tertiary and higher education, we are pleading with the Scottish Government to completely rethink its priorities and to be serious about the need to reform the funding model. Because if they don't do that, not only will they badly let down another generation of Scottish students, but also seriously undermine Scotland's competitiveness. Ministers need to bear in mind that international trends show very clearly indeed that those further and higher educational systems which are the most successful in terms of focusing on teaching and research and the best educational outcomes, rather than on governance, are those which have the greatest arm's length from government. Now, that is not a political point, but one which reflects what works best in education. And on that note, Deputy Presiding Officer, I support the motion in the name of Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Ms Smith. That concludes the debate on backing Scotland's colleges and apprenticeships, and there will be a very short pause before we move on to the next item of business. Thank you.